All right, welcome again to today's session. So today I want us to see how we can be able to configure error mapping within Spring Boot in this reactive framework. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is a simple error that in terms of us searching an actor by ID, we are going to try and search an ID which doesn't exist in the database. And using the HTTP mechanism is that we need to respond with a 404 not found for that particular resource, and we are going to see how we prepare the payload on that. Then we'll be able to see how we handle the particular response. So to get started, we are going to head over to, from our previous project, we are going to just proceed under the actor controller. You'll be able to see that there is a place whereby we are making use of a get mapping where we supply the actor ID, and in this case we end up finding that particular actor. Now there are situations whereby you need to return a custom response whenever we don't find an actor by that ID. Then when we were looking at this particular method from the actor service under the repository there, you find that whenever we find by ID, it either return a mono of that particular entity with the given ID, or it return a mono of empty. So I'm going to show you how we can be able to add another method on top of this one to handle the not found and throw a custom exception, and which we can be able now to handle and return a custom error response. So to get started, I'm just going to first start this application so that we can see what is there, and then from there we can now be able to quickly review the next phase of what we intend to do. Okay, so let it start. Alright, so our application is up and running. As you can see, it's running on port 8080, and we have everything up to date. As you can see, the schema is up to date and no necessarily migration that is supposed to be run. So what I'm going to do is go to the REST endpoint here, and then we are in just to click send the request get ID. You can see at this point is that we'll be able to get the particular act ID. Now let's try to find an ID which doesn't exist, which is going to be a very huge number in this case. And then we try to send that. You'll be able to see we are getting a 200 OK. But then in return to indicate to the user that we need to develop a custom response, which will be able to communicate that this particular resource with this particular ID was not found. Now first thing that you're going to do is going to go back to the actor controller, or actually the actor service implementation, whereby we are actually doing the actual query. So in this case, we are going to, after the find by ID actor function call, we're going to introduce another method call, which is a chain method. So we're going to chain this one with the switch if empty. So we are going to check whenever it's an empty mono is returned on the first go, then we are going to execute this particular functionality, which is going to be another mono, which is going to be alternate to this one. So this alternate mono will be the one that will be used to handle the actual not found value. So in this case, we are going to switch if empty and return a mono.error. Yes, we are going to return mono.error, and in this case, we are going to return a custom exception. So with this, we are just to create a new, we can say actor not found exception. So we are going to create this particular exception, and then within this one we are going to supply the message. So we are going to say actor not found with the given ID. Alright, so that is the exception that we are going to throw. So we don't have this particular exception at the moment, so we need to create an exception folder for us to have those registered exceptions. So the first thing that you're going to go is on the actual service base, and then create a new folder or package which is going to be exception. So with the exception, we are going to create a new file and call it actor not found exception.java. So I'm going to create that particular class that way. And then this particular class is going to extend a runtime exception, because we don't want anyone to handle that particular exception. We want it to be a runtime and check the exception. So in this case, we are going to say extends runtime exception. Right? So once we have that, then we need to supply the constructor with a message. So what we are going to do is have a public constructor for this, which is going to be public actor not found exception, and then we are going to receive in the message, which is going to be of type string message. Alright, so with this message, we are going to call the super constructor to initialize the actual a description of the exception. So in this case, we are going to call super, and then supply the actual message is going to be message. Right? So our particular exception is ready for use. So what we're going to do is just save that, then go back to this one, and then import that particular exception class. So we're going just to import that. So as you can see, we have actually imported that from the exception folder. So that is all that we need to do in order to throw a custom exception, by just introducing this switch if empty. Whenever we don't find anything here, then we can be able to make the call this one, and then this one will be able to return an error. So you can be able to indicate an error by just returning Mono.error, and then you throw the actual instance of the exception as the argument to this particular Mono.error function. As you can see, this error is actually used to terminate with the specified error immediately after being subscribed to. So whenever we find an error, then we terminate that particular execution, and the control is returned to the caller. So that is all we need. So what I'm going to do is quickly restart and see what we're actually getting. Alright, so I'm going to close the current one and then rerun it again, so that you can be able to get the new changes. Alright, the application has been started. Now we can try and send the actual request with the that we did send on the previous time. So we are in just to click again, send request, and you'll be able to see that now we have an internal server error. But then, looking at the logs on the application itself, you can see that we got this particular exception called, and you can see that it's actor not found with the given ID. So what you're going to do is now handle this particular actor not found exception and return a custom message. So that is the next task that we need to do on this particular section of handling errors. So quickly, we're going to go under the exception folder. We're going to create something known as a controller device. A controller device is used to map different exceptions into custom messages, whereby you can be able now to define the control of how the structure of an exception is going to look like. So what I'm going to do here is going to be simple. I'm going to create a simple class which is going to be controller add device. That one is going to be controller device.java. Alright. So to make this particular class a controller device, we need to annotate using a specific notation which is known as controller add device. So we need this particular annotation to indicate that this particular class will be used to handle the particular exception handling. So we are going to have this one. So let me just quickly remove this, and then we can actually import. Yeah, so that it's complaining because ideally, because I named this particular class as the same as the annotation. So what I'm going to do is just before that, we're going just to refactor this one. So I'm going to refactor this one as controller. We can call it Sakila controller device. Sakila controller add device. So we're just to rename it that way, so that we can now be able to make use of a controller add device, which is going to be that, and then we can be able to see the import statement. Yeah, so that is all that we need. by annotating this particular class as control advice, then we have delegated anything to do with error handling will be done by this particular class. So the next thing that we are going to do is first handle this actor not found exception and see how we can be able to return a custom message. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a simple method here, which is going to be public mono, and then we are going to return a simple map of string and comma string, whereby to be able to have the different sections. So I'm using generics here. So mono map of string and string, and then this is going to say handle actor not found exception. And then whenever we have this method to handle this one, is going to expect the actual exception, which is going to be an argument of actor not found exception, which you can just call as EX or exception. And then from there we need to return their actual response. So what I'm going to do is just import this one mono from core publisher, and then I also imported the map from Java util. So you can see util map. Then from here we need now to return something. So what I'm going to do for now, I'm just going to return null, just to show you we don't have an error for that. So we need to return a particular payload which is going to be of type map. Now the next thing that we need to understand here is that we need to specify what particular, delegate the particular exception that we want to handle. Even though we are receiving it as an argument, then we need to tell the Spring Boot application we need to handle this particular exception. And then we use the annotation on this method, which is going to be at exception handler, and to use that exception handler, and then within it we are going to specify the actual exception that we want to handle. So it's going to be actor not found dot class. So that is what we need to specify. Now whenever we be returning this particular method, as you can see by default we got a 500 error, a 500 response, but then we want to return a status code which communicates the intent of this particular failure. So what we are going to do is below the at exception handler we are going to specify at response status. So we are going to specify the response data that should be returned, and in this case we are going to specify the parameter which is going to be the HTTP value, is going to be HTTP status dot okay. So sorry, for this one we want to say not found exception. So I think we need to just return HTTP status not found. If you don't want to specify the key as value, you can just avoid it and specify HTTP not found, and that should be able to work because that is the default. So to pick that as the first argument. So you can say now we have defined that we need to handle this particular exception. We need to return a 404 not found, and then now we need to return a custom message. So what I'm going to do is just build a simple map here. So I'm going just to say var map, because of Java 17, I'm going just to have map equal to new hash map this way, and then with this map we are just to have map dot put. So we are just to put the key. In this case we are going to have a simple key which is going to be success, then it's going to be false whenever we are dealing with the exception, so it's going to be false, and then after that we are going to have map dot put message, so we can have the message msg, and then the message is going to be the actual exception dot get localized message. So I'm going just to return that our simple map which returns those two values, and then in this case we are in just to return this particular map. Alright, so all is done. I think we just need to quick fix this one and change the hash map to be that. So you can just quickly return it that way, and that should be okay. I think map string, and then from here we need to have string value of this. So I'm going just to say either we can just make it generic so that we return an object. So I'm going just to have object, whatever object we return, then it will be able to pick that one automatically, so that we have this one being able to take effect. And in this case, we just need to define that. So all that is done. So what else do we need? We need now, ideally what we need is a map, a mono of this particular map. So what we're going to do is return mono.just, and then with that we specify the map name. In this case, we'll be able to have that. Let's see, we haven't imported the hash map. It's okay. Map, and then okay, so in this case, what are we missing is string, and in this case I just want a simple map without the mono, that way. Alright, then once we format that, so we have our map, and then once you're done preparing our map, then we can just return it as mono.just. Then that's all that we need to handle that particular exception. Alright, so let's see. If we close this one and restart it, then we should be good to go. So restart it and then wait for it to pick. Alright, the application is up and running. Now we can give it another try on the same endpoint. So I'm going to invoke the same endpoint here, send a request, and then we check what happens. So still we didn't manage to handle that. So what we are going to do is check again what happened. So in this case, we could not resolve a view with this name. Again, we can just send again. Yeah, so it's complaining that we don't have this particular view of that particular exception. So let's quickly check and check what is happening and on terms of our control device. Alright, so you see we are unable to handle this particular exception because we have a miss in something, and this particular miss is evident in regards to how we defined our handle method. As you can see, in this case we are handling this particular failure is happening at this point. But then what you need to understand from our previous tutorials about controller device is that because we are dealing with REST controllers, then we just need to make use of at REST controller device instead of the controller device. So we are just going to introduce another notation just in place of that. So it's going to be REST controller device. So that is all that we need to switch, and that will be able to make our application now able to handle anything that fails whenever we are dealing with REST controller. So what I'm going to do, save that, and then quickly restart the application. Okay. Alright, so quickly you can restart the application once more. Okay, now the application is up and running. Let's now give it the last try, and now we should be okay. So send this request again. So I'm going to just come back here and send the request. Now we should be able to get a custom error message coming through. As you can see, now we have an HTTP 1.1.400.404 not found, and then the content type is application JSON, and our map of the error has been returned, and you can see there is no funny error logging on the actual application server log. So that means we have been able to manage our error handling whenever we don't find anything, whenever we are making use of the reactive framework. So that's all for error handling and using controller device, as you can see. So we just needed to have a class which is going to be thrown a custom error exception, and then we added our Sakila controller device which will be able to control the particular application in regard to the different exceptions. But then we are going to see how then do we handle other exceptions which are not enlisted here. So what we are going to do quickly is going to have a duplicate of this. So whenever we don't find a specific exception, then we can use the parent one. We can handle the actual parent exception, which is going to be just the exception class, by using that. And then you just need also to remove this one, and then this is going to be handle the exception. So this one is not specific to which particular exception you are handling. Now because you don't know the actual exception, what you're going to do is return a custom error status response code of internal server error. So we are going to make use of internal server error whenever we don't find any other exceptions. That means our application is error proof in regard to how it's going to respond with a simple custom messages, and with that the exception will be able to get the actual message that happened during the execution. So that is how you handle the exceptions. And just to quickly review is that we just need to make use of these few annotations, and then we'll be able to guide our application on how to respond whenever we find faults within our system. Thank you. Till next time. Bye bye. Remember to subscribe and click the notification bell to get more on whenever we upload new videos. Thank you.